Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Totally Unprepared. I am Bill Carns. This is my co-host Dave Champion, and together we are Totally Unprepared. Dave, how the hell are you?
I'm outstanding. How are you, my friend?
You know, I'm doing really well.
Good.
I got to tell you, it's interesting right now. We've got a second winter in a row where we've had no winter. 2 years in a row, no winter down here in our southern Nevada area, and 2 years in a row that the East Coast and the northern part of the country is blanketed. I think I've had like 3 barbecues already over at the house. Short sleeve shirts. My daughter that lives down in the Nashville area, she's got a bunch of snow and she's got to drive an hour back and forth to work for the next couple of weeks. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of happy to live here this time of year. It's the summertime that I'm not happy to live here, but the wintertime is great.
I'm driving down the road probably 2-3 days ago. All 4 windows down, stereo blasting 60 miles an hour. You know, I'm thinking
a few days ago, I did it on the way to the studio.
There you go. All the windows in the house were open when I left the house today. That's how nice it is.
So, Dave, we've got something in the news. Obviously, marijuana has been, and the use thereof, the dropping of all the legalization of marijuana, the dropping of the laws, making it more legal, putting it back on the books, if you will, has been a topic of discussion over the last few years, really heavy for the last 18 months or more. Mm-hmm. Since Colorado, Washington, Oregon have all legalized it. California's always on the cusp. There is legislation in Nevada to consider it. But there's something in the UK. Tell us about it.
Oh, this is great. First of all, let me make the blanket statement that when it comes to government and marijuana, the story has always been a lie. Whatever the government says about pot has always been a lie. I mean, what was that?
And it's not relegated just to pot.
Right.
It's the government lying to better their own
What was that movie about pot from the 30s that was so popular? I'm having a senior moment on the name of that. Anyway, it showed that, you smoked a joint, you rape women, crazy stuff. I mean, literally, that's what happened in the movie.
Okay.
Reefer Madness.
Reefer Madness. Okay,
all right. So, making the statement the government always lies. There is a movement afoot in virtually all of what we consider sort of the Western civilized nations to get rid of the laws criminalizing pot. And that's no less true in Europe, which includes England. And so there's this tension. There's the rational people who want to say, look, it's nature. It's a piece of nature. You're going to lock me in a cage over nature? Get a clue. Wake up. Pull your head out of your rear end, right? And then there's the kind that, we have to keep our prison budgets up and our police budgets up and we have to keep the clamp on everybody. So marijuana has to remain illegal. So in the UK, a study just came out, and I'm going to come right out and tell you that I believe the study is contrived because you hear it and you're like, what? They took a look. There's supposed to be this particular kind of weed. Unfortunately, I can't remember what they call it right now.
Let's call it Superbud.
Superbud, all right.
Just for the lack of argument, Superbud.
There is this Superbud, and these researchers out of England have said that 1 out of 4 people who smoke Superbud have a, in quotes, psychotic episode. Now, we've all used the word psycho or psychotic at times.
This sounds rather sensationalized.
You think?
To support the position of the government as irrational as it will be.
Right, and I had to go look up psychotic episode to make sure that I understood precisely.
You could ask an ex-girlfriend of mine what a psychotic episode's all about and just watch it. Yeah.
And what it means is the inability to distinguish reality from whatever's in your head. Okay? That you can no longer distinguish what is true, what is the reality around you, and what is not. Now, if somebody said to me the use of LSD would cause a psychotic episode.
Having some shrooms, dropping some acid, maybe.
Right.
And
you've never smoked pot.
No.
And I smoked it prolifically when I was a teenager. I mean, I grew up in Southern California in the 70s when even parents wouldn't say that dope was bad, right? I don't want to be too forthcoming.
Peel it, dry it, roll it, smoke it.
Let's say if it was smokable, I smoked it. How's that? That's a big, broad category. A lot of people can read whatever they want into that. And never had a psychotic episode. And the very idea, now I haven't smoked pot in 35 years, but the very idea that somebody could have that anybody could, no less 1 in 4 could have a psychotic episode. No, this is just to give aid and comfort to the side that wants to continue to punish people for having some nature.
Now, 1 in 4 people in Great Britain and all of the UK pretty much have decent teeth. The other 3 out of 4 don't. So I wonder if there's a correlate. What is this 1 in 4 garbage? And by the way, I have to say, I'm not a big fan of the comes from nature argument, and I'll tell you why. Snake venom is also natural, but
Okay.
you don't see people putting it in a needle and shooting it into their arm. So, poison ivy and poison oak are also natural. So is the slime off the bright yellow frog that'll kill you. I mean, that's also natural. So I'm not big into the nature. I mean, there's things that grow that'll kill us if we consume it. However,
And very few of those do you get put in a cage.
you're right. But there are, as a matter of fact, the little red or yellow frog thing or green frog, whatever color this frog is, there's actually a law in the state of Nevada on because they secrete, you can actually get it through your pores and get like an
have heard of
acid
this,
trip.
yes.
There's actually a law in the state of Nevada banning those frogs because of that nature.
Because you could have like an LSD trip if you
Yeah,
had
yeah, exactly. Because it has nothing to do with the harmful nature of it. It has to do with the government wants to get paid if you get high.
Oh,
They want
there
their
we
dime.
have it. Yep.
They want the money if you get high.
And we go all the way back to the beginning of this nation, right? One of the Shays' Rebellion, one of the first acts of violence by the United States government was that they wanted their money. If you drank some alcohol and you caught a buzz,
They wanted to get their money for you.
they wanted to get
And,
paid.
it's interesting. The government has regulated, obviously, tobacco for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't gone so far as to regulate it as a drug, the nicotine as a drug.
Right.
But they've considered it over time.
It's a syntax.
It is. It really is. And the interesting thing is right now with cigarettes being so taxed out of proportion. I mean, they used to be what, 50 cents a pack, and now they're more like $5 a pack.
I think so.
And you're probably paying about $1.25 a pack for the cigarettes, and all the rest is in various federal, state, county, and local taxes. Right?
So much for the theory that they're going to tax it out of
Yeah.
usage, right?
And here's the thing: they want that money.
Of course they
money
do.
and government are like drugs and an addict.
Yep.
They get their money. Another thing they get the money from is fuel taxes. So now that they have, through the EPA, had to increase the fuel mileage of all the vehicles over the last 20 or 30 years, they're getting less and less in those taxes. People are being smarter. They have more fuel-efficient vehicles. Now they're looking at trying to tax mileage because they don't have all the fuel tax coming in. For cigarettes, people are going to those e-cigarettes. And that solution that they have doesn't have the tobacco, the tar, and some of the other, there's like 120 chemicals in a
And
cigarette.
it probably has nothing in it that would justify the government taxing it.
And that's the thing, is you're only paying sales tax on it. There's not the same tax you'd pay for cigarettes. It's a lot more economical to do it. So a lot of people are leaving the tobacco products behind and they're going to the e-cigarettes. Now the government wants to find a way to tax that the same way as a sin tax because they're not getting the billions of dollars out of the tax money from the cigarettes, which, by the way, those are funds that actually go into the general fund opposite of the income tax that the IRS steals and sends to the Federal Reserve.
And here's something that I've long held when we talk about syntax, because I mean, I heard the phrase syntax when I was probably a boy, and I've heard it consistently over time to describe the kind of taxes
They
we're
just
talking about.
tax the living hell out of Vegas.
Right. But my thing is this. Given the nature of government and how, as we've gotten older, we have learned that the government is, at best, greedy and rapacious, and at worst, utterly corrupt. Okay? So where do they get off determining what is sinful for everybody outside of government?
Yeah, you're having the biggest degenerates of society
Right.
dictating to us how we're supposed to do things?
Yeah, it's like, wait a second, you have lost, if you ever had, any moral authority to call anything a sin and tax it except perhaps yourselves. Yeah. Maybe we should have that.
What's that? If you become a politician, we tax the living hell out of you?
Yes, or a government official above a certain level. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the typist, right, honest work, but at a certain point, maybe you just get taxed on just because you're clearly never mind.
D-bag.
Yeah, the D-bag, there you go.
I'm with you. I have to tell you, I've been involved in politics for quite some time and very heavy the last few years. And I am absolutely sickened by the way politics work. Even not so much at a local level, but to a point. Even at like the county level. I guess I would say at the local point too. There are certain aspects of the local and the county level that have absolutely sickened me. And you have people like commissioners that have the authority to do something, but they want to try to believe that what's going on right in front of their face isn't actually the case. The writing is on the wall. It's been spray painted across the wall. This is what's going on. Neon signs flashing. I don't want to believe that's what's really going on. I want to believe that people are good and they're not actually doing that. Wake up.
Bill, I've got to tell you that we've never had this discussion, but I've often wondered because, I don't pretend to know you through and through to the very last little bit, but I know you pretty damn well. And I have always wondered how you do it. I mean,
I wondered the same thing,
you
Dave.
invited me to that one meeting, remember?
You actually came to 2 or 3 meetings, but you were there for a very short
The
period of
last
time.
one that was like 7 or 8?
Okay, yes.
I'm at one meeting, and an elected official is disrespectful to me and attempts to chump me.
A state level.
Yes.
yeah.
And he got slapped pretty hard for
Yes, he did.
his efforts. I'd turn around and verbally beat the crap out of him. But and I look at stuff like that. I mean, that probably happened. I'd been seated in that chair about 18 minutes, and the fight was already on.
Oh, I think it's more like 8. It happened early.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. I mean,
Yeah.
hats off to you, buddy.
Just so
you're
you know,
a better
that's
man than I.
there is a date on the calendar to which my term expires. And I'm looking forward to that, really, because then I can back off. I can be involved to whatever level I choose, not to whatever level I am responsible for in a group of bylaws based on an organization I'm in. If I want to get involved at a certain level, I can.
Yeah.
If I don't have to. And I got to tell you, I'm looking forward to the break, man. As a matter of fact, I've recently been doing a lot of upgrades to my shop. I got a lot of projects I'm working on, a few that have gotten out of the way. I got a new lighting system in there, some more electrical run. I'm ready to go. I'm already planning on it.
Bill Carns, President, 2016.
I would do 2020, and I would reset it back to the Constitution. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Dave's segment.
All right, we are back, and it is now time for... All right. What the heck is up with America being so incredibly divisive? Now, is divisiveness in its own right negative? I think oftentimes it is, but I'm speaking more to the aspect of we are so divisive as a people, we cannot act effectively in our own best interest because we are so divisive. Let me give you an example. I'm reading a book right now that was published in 1973. Okay? So we're talking 40 years ago. And I'm calling through, and the book is at a part where it's talking about things that occurred in 1964. And there's a whole myriad, a list of things going on. But one of the conclusions stated concerning 1964 is that government officials who do wrong are never held accountable. Now, this is a book published in 1973 talking about a phenomenon that was noted in great abundance by people in 1964, which means that it had obviously been going on for some time before 1964. Back into the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, forever, I don't know. But in 1964, one of the main themes was government officials are never held accountable for their wrongdoing. Here we are in 2015. Government officials are never held accountable for their wrongdoing. Okay? So in all the time from 1964 until 2015, nothing has changed. Now, obviously, we have the ability to vote, yes? I happen to believe at the national level a lot of things are rigged, but rigged by how they go about it, not rigged as in they're falsely counting the votes. It's not like a Stalin-type rig. The system is set up to disempower the citizens at the federal level, is my view. but not so much at the local level. So we have the ability to vote, we have the ability to solve problems, but here we are, a quote from 1964, we're in 2015, and still the same exact problems exist. Now, along these lines, prior to showing up for the show this morning, I was at a business here in town, and I know the business owner, and he and I were sitting down in his business, and we were chit-chatting. He happens to own a copy of my book, Income Tax: Shattering the Myths, and he's probably about 60% of the way through the book. And he says, what are we going to do about this? How do we get the government straightened out? And my observation was, it's not really the government. I mean, the government is the one moving the lie forward, constantly perpetuating the lie, but it is us who are doing it to each other. And I gave him an example. I said, when somebody says to a citizen who's informed, fill out this tax form, and the citizen who's informed says, no thank you, that tax form doesn't apply to me. The person who made the demand doesn't say, oh, okay, you've done the research, you know the form doesn't apply to you, good to go, here we'll just carry on. Instead, the person says something like, if you don't fill out this form, I'm not going to cut your check. Or if you don't fill out this form, I'm going to withhold 36% of what I owe you under backup withholding, section 3406 of the tax code. Excuse me, sir, that 3406 has nothing to do with me. It's not applicable to me. You can't back up withhold on me. Yes, I can, and yes, I will. So, Bill, why is it that here we are in 2015, we should know by experience these problems we've had to endure these problems for a long, long time without putting a number to it. We certainly know as early as 1964, these people were experiencing it in this country. What are the factors, in your opinion, what are the factors as to why we can't ever as a people come together and quit being so divisive and actually respect liberty and create the nation we all want to have?
I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I am at one with the people. I am at one with my universe, and nothing and nobody ever bothers me.
This explains the first part where I said, I don't know how you do it. You're at one with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, Dave, there's so many different things that are marketed to everybody based on your individualism, right? I'll give you, for instance, there was a young woman who was being interviewed by Oprah Winfrey recently. And Oprah Winfrey is big into the whole African-American terminology and scene. Mm-hmm. And this young lady is of the same cultural descent, and she says, I don't identify myself as an African-American. I identify myself as an American. And Oprah literally sat back and said, oh, girl, oh, you know you're going to catch some flack for that. And she says, I don't know exactly where my ancestors come from. I know that I'm an American, and I know that several generations of my family all come from America. I am American.
Right.
Do you introduce yourself as a European American?
I do not.
I do not either. However, my DNA says I could.
Right.
To a certain aspect, I could introduce myself as a Native American.
There you go.
Who's Native? If you're born here, a couple of generations in, you're Native, aren't you?
Right.
So a lot of different things. People want to have this individualism around themselves. And I got to tell you, when we all noticed all of these veils drop, and everybody in America seemed to come together for at least a short period of time. Started at 9/11. And since then, now let's not get into 9/11. I'm saying at that time, a lot of people, most people in America dropped all the garbage, and we were together as an American community, feeling as though we had been sucker punched.
Okay. Let me just jump in here for a quick second.
Sure.
It has been known since there were rulers of the world, it has been known that you can galvanize the people by claiming that you've been attacked and there's an enemy.
Yes.
I'm talking about coming together in a healthy way, not through the negativity of war.
No, and I get it.
Okay.
Allow me to carry on.
Sure.
By saying that we did that about 14 years ago, tells me that we as a nation, as a people, have the ability to do it. And that lasted for a good year or so.
A whole year.
Yeah, which means we can do it through all 4 seasons. Every day of the year, we can get it done. You know, from New Year's to New Year's, or 9/11 to 9/11. We can get it done, everything in between. The thing is I think it's really been pushed on us. I mean, you look, who's the most divisive person in the entire country right now?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
Okay.
And who helps him out? People like Al Sharpton, the rhyming reverend of just total nonsense, right? Everything he says is in a rhyme. It means nothing. And you know something? I got to tell you, Al, I got 2 words for you and your credibility. Tawana Brawley. Now sit down and take a pill and shut up. It's this sort of thing that helps divide the country. It's like those of you who would come to us to divide us, be it politically, religiously, through some other sort of secular definition, sit down and shut up. And everybody needs to actually pay attention to where this is coming from. And what good does it get any of us?
Right.
We get all pissed off about things. We get all upset about things when instead we could just sit down, have a beer, cup of coffee, glass of water, whatever you like, and enjoy.
Yeah. You mentioned Al Sharpton and Barack Obama, which of course raises the specter of the race issue. And of course, we all remember the Ferguson riots and what happened there. And one of the things that I looked at with the Ferguson situation is, and this as a police officer, there are cops who, when they work in the hood, they could care less about the law, they could care less about constitutional rights.
Oh yeah, they don't care at all.
So my point is, I saw a lot of people on the right, okay, who looked at the violent protesters, the looters as an example, and tried to dismiss the complaints of everybody in the low econ environment. Okay? And I thought that was another example of being divisive. Okay? It's bad enough that we have a situation where we have sort of a permanent underclass in this country, and then we have the enforcement agents of the state that are sort of, I think in their minds, keeping a lid on that. Okay? And you and I both know that it's not done, a great percentage of the time down there, it's not done correctly. And so those people, and I'm not elevating them to God status. When you say something like this, people are like, oh, are you saying they're wonderful? No, none of us are wonderful, right? But a lot of those people have legitimate complaints. So then, when they turn out in the streets to protest, let's say, I'm going to throw out an arbitrary number, 1,000 people show up to protest. 12 of them are violent. It's used to dismiss the concerns of the other 880,
It is, and oftentimes, Dave, you get situations like that, let's say those 12 and 1,000. They're oftentimes, imagine this, they're plants by people who don't agree with the opinion of these other, 988 people that are out there. Those 12 are oftentimes plants to go in there and make trouble to make it look like everybody should be dismissed.
Do you remember there was actually a couple of cops got outed? They were at one of these protests. It wasn't in Ferguson, but it was at the time of the Ferguson incident. A couple of guys were starting violence. They were protesters. They had masks on, like the bandana type thing. They were out there as protesters, and they were starting trouble. And because they were violent, the media immediately went to them and surrounded them with cameras and started encroaching on them. And somebody actually stepped in while the camera was on one of these guys, stepped in and pulled his bandana down. Guy came out with a gun. Police officer stepped back. And it turns out both these guys were sworn peace officers.
Yeah.
They were there pretending to be demonstrators, actually instigating violence, and they got caught on camera.
You see, you need to break these kind of people's necks as far as I'm concerned. Really, when you start seeing people who are perpetrating these sorts of things to divide us, oftentimes it's politicians, oftentimes it's people in religion or allegedly in religion that are just trying to promote themselves, get themselves out there and their face on TV and their voice out. These are the sorts of people that we need to realize it's time to change the channel. Just turn it off. And don't give them the time of day. Because we can get along. You and I have very wide and diverse social networks of individuals that we talk to.
Very much
and
so.
I don't mean social network online. I'm talking people that we socialize with. Very wide, very diverse, politically, religiously, culturally diverse, that we get along with. Because that crap is not important.
Right.
I've got a crew of guys that comes over and they do landscaping at the house. I take care of the yard and everything. And oftentimes people will be like, I'm not going to talk to my Lance. One of the guys that comes over, he's in charge of the crew, one of the coolest guys I know. And as it turns out, I saw him at the airport. I'm coming back from the NAMM show. I've got a guitar in a case. He's a guitar player. We talk guitars. So like every couple of weeks, whenever they're out, we sit there and we chat about guitars for 5 minutes or so.
Right.
Just a cool guy. And I met this guy because he comes over and that's his job. Stop with all the class warfare and all the divisiveness. It doesn't do anybody any good, but it will hurt every one of us and take us down.
And that is exactly my point. If we're going to make progress, we need to stop pointing the finger at each other. And we'll be back right after these words.
Welcome back, America. Now it's time for... You know what really grinds my gears? War. And I don't mean war in the conventional sense. Bombs bursting in air and rockets flying through the air and guys out there with their guns pounding away. No, I'm talking about these pseudo-false wars. War on everything. We've got a war on drugs. We've got a war on poverty. We've got a war on late library books. We've got a war. I actually read something recently. It was something silly. There's a war on counterfeiting. There's that. There's a war on education. There's a war on brunch, a war on eating seeds at breakfast time. There's a war on friggin' everything. I tell you what, if I want to have a war on something, I want to have a war on tofu, because that stuff sucks. I don't like eating bean curd. I want a war on beets. There's stuff that I don't like. Is it a war on everything? I'm sick and tired of all this war on everything. You want to know what I want a war on? I want a war on government that cannot live within its own financial means. That's the war I want to have. You know the real problem that I have with the way that government spends? Most rational human beings in their family environment or in their individual capacity do this. You know what? I have X amount of dollars coming in. Let's say it's $40,000 a year. I now know with that $40,000 that I've got to allow expenses for where I live, what I drive, how I eat, my entertainment budget, where I'm able to vacation to, things such as that. They got to live within their means. Government doesn't. No, they decide, you know what, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to go about doing it. This is all the garbage that we want to have involved in there. Now, let's add up all the numbers. That's how much it is. Good. Now let's go tax the hell out of the people and find out how to pay for all of it. Are you kidding me? Let's have a war on that. Dave, I want to have a war on war-ons. I do. There's a war on this. I want to have a war on the war on da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
If the Congress does not declare war and it doesn't include fighting a battle, end that stupid phrase, a war on this, a war on that, a war on the other thing. I am sick, because if you and I said, hey, I'm going to have a war on lightly brewed coffee, and we post that on social media, you know the government, oh, maybe you said you're going to have a war on something. Well, you guys have war on garbage all the time.
Yes.
I'm sick of it. I'm really sick of this.
And for some of them on my show, I have absolutely refused to refer to them that way anymore, except to point out how insipid it is. So what I'll say is emphasis on, because that's really what they mean.
A war on insipidity.
Yeah, but here...
not to be confused with the war on impotency. Thank you, Viagra and Cialis.
Okay. I got a story, but I'll hold that story out. We just talked about it in the segment before this, maybe it was 2 segments before, that war galvanizes people. And it's intended to make people feel that their emotions towards this thing are righteous. Okay? And so I think the government has learned correctly, and here's the sad part, this is what we talk about, Americans need to pull their head out of their rear ends. The government has learned correctly that if they call it a war, the people who line up to support whatever it is then feel themselves to be righteous warriors for the cause of good. It's like, shut the hell up, you ignorant morons.
You know what I think might actually change these people around, these simpletons that would actually get behind the cause, is instead of calling it like a war on education or a war on, have it a jihad. right? How about a jihad on education, a jihad on drugs?
Yeah.
How about, wait, I don't want to be involved in a jihad, but I want to be involved in a war? Hey, it's the same damn thing.
It
One's
is, absolutely.
based on the Islamic faith. Let's have a war on this, a jihad on that. I'm so sick of everybody having a war on, and it's the stupidest thing. It's like, I'm having a war on carpet tax because one of them popped through my carpet strip and I got a boo-boo on the bottom of my foot. Now I've got a war, and I want to go across America and, you actually get people that go on these crusades. These are the people that need to be piss tested to see what's in their system, because something ain't right. When you get some sort of a chemical imbalance to where there's something that is so small, it's like, I want to have a war on wooden dining chairs because I got a splinter and I want to take my message across the world. Look out for these wood dining chairs because you might get a splinter and that could injure you. You could get some sort of a disease. Oh my God, imagine if it came from a dining chair that was recycled from some sort of timber from a railroad track that was, the friggin' tie. Yeah. And that thing's all loaded up with creosote or from a utility pole.
You could get poisoned.
It can cause all kinds of mental problems for your unborn child.
War against frogs that secrete stuff?
Yeah, exactly. A war on oh my God, then we have PETA involved. No, we can't allow you to kill the frogs. I mean, war on this, that, and the other. Knock it off.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Here's a rule of thumb I think that everybody should adopt. All Americans should adopt. The minute the government comes out and says they're going to be a war against, people should just say, I don't support it. Rule of thumb.
Let me tell you.
Whatever you're trying to pass into law, I can't raise both my fingers, but the hell with you. How's that?
I got to tell you, when it comes to politics,
yes,
and the way that these people are doing this. Now, you know that I don't know if it's passed or not, but at this point in time, I know that you might know if it's actually gone through earlier this week or not, but there's this thing that came up just in the last few days about ATF deciding they wanted to ban the M855 ammo, the green tip ammo. And I believe that they actually did something through administrative effort.
What they're trying to do is just say the ATF as an administration is attempting to take the administrative position. They have determined that is armor piercing. And since in statute, armor piercing bullets at the federal level are prohibited.
Well, they don't meet the definition of the sporting use of the Gun Control Act of 1968, which, by the way, the vast majority of the Gun Control Act of 1968 went down in flames in the Heller and McDonald decisions. They just haven't been applied directly at the lower courts yet.
Right.
And I cannot wait for somebody like Second Amendment Foundation or Gun Owners of America or somebody, even the NRA, as inept as they can be legally at some time, to look at that and say, look, because of Heller and McDonald, all of these provisions of GCA 68 are gone, which means that removes the authority of the ATF to do these various things.
Alan Gura.
Alan Gore is the man.
He's the guy.
He really is. I actually had the opportunity to speak with him a few years ago.
He just had
for about 5 or 10 minutes.
He just got a judge last week to strike down the interstate restriction on firearms, on handguns.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Now, let's tell the audience what the green tips are, because they may not be familiar.
Yeah, you get bullets that are with military designations. They will paint just the tip of the bullet, not that goes into the rifling, various colors. And that tells you by looking at it, as long as you're not colorblind, what you're dealing with.
And the green tip means?
The green tip is supposed to mean armor piercing for the purposes of body armor, not steel penetrating, which would be a black tip. A black tip is a steel penetrating round, oftentimes referred to as armor piercing. But there's just between, the green tip is designed to go through Soviet-made body armor and then do its damage in the body.
And it also has other purposes. For
it's
instance,
also very accurate.
Yeah, the 5.56 is not a heavy round. Doesn't hit hard out past about 120 yards. Okay, that's where it drops down beneath I forget all the technical jargon, but where it
basically has a subcaliber beyond about that.
Correct. And so let's say let's say somebody steps behind drywall at 160 yards, a double-sided drywall wall. Okay, a standard 5.56 round may not penetrate both pieces of drywall. It's going to scatter.
Yeah.
The green tip with that little metallic core that little piece of metal will drive through both pieces of drywall and strike the guy hiding on the other side, even if the surrounding media scatters in the drywall. Okay? So it has these advantages that have nothing to do with armor piercing, and I think to call it green tip armor piercing is absurd.
Well, and again, it's armor in the view of body armor because it's made of various cloth-type materials.
Right. So it's cloth piercing.
Really, yeah. It's heavy clothing piercing is what it is.
Yeah.
And they say it doesn't, sporting purposes, the Second Amendment was not put together for sporting purposes. It does not protect you.
What?
It doesn't protect your right to grab a shotgun and go out and hunt pheasant and quail.
I thought George Washington and the Continental Army, they were just out hunting and they happened to hit enough redcoats that they went home.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
The redcoats. Yeah.
The redcoats.
That's exactly what it was.
They were scared by all the hunting the Continental Army was doing, and the militia. Let's not forget the militia.
And keep in mind, in 1775, the musket was an assault weapon, and it was banned. And in 1776, they moved to ban the ammunition. And then at the Hill of Concord, Lexington, that's where they decided to draw a line in the sand and say,
Now see, in the government schools, they rarely teach that what the redcoats were doing when they came to Concord and Lexington was they had come, because in those days, gunpowder was considered so dangerous that in many towns it was held in a common armory in the center of town, and you kept it there for the safety of your own family.
Well, and on top of that, it was somewhat difficult to keep. So if everybody got together and they built a structure that was safe, they could all store it there communally as well.
And so what the British were marching to Concord and Lexington to effect was the seizure of the common stores of gunpowder. Most people kept the ball in their own possession, but the gunpowder was in this, that's where we get the phrase magazine. They kept it in the common town magazine, and the British were actually coming to take the gunpowder so that the colonists could not fight back against the perceived illegal acts of the British.
Yeah, in this whole thing with the M855 or the SS-109, essentially the same stuff, this will, if they get away with this, this will just start to go. Imagine this. If the government wanted everyone to stop driving, they wouldn't have to outlaw cars. They would just need to make gasoline so amazingly difficult and or expensive to get.
Sure.
So that you wouldn't use it. So, you know, it's like me. I know you and I both know people that love to buy a bunch of guns, love to buy all kinds of guns, but they don't have the ammo to shoot through it. I would rather have 2 or 3 guns and a whole garage full of ammo as opposed to a garage full of guns in a drawer full of ammo.
Terrorist.
I'm just saying.
Don't you love that when cops do a raid in some place? The person may or may not have done anything, and then they put all of his guns and all of his ammo and everything out on the driveway, and they say that, you know, he had an arsenal. Please don't ever raid my house, because I will make those stories look like walking.
Yeah, and, you know, it's interesting. When I see those sorts of things, I look to see if the person knew what they were doing based on the gear that they've got.
Right.
If some jackwad has a high point and an old rusty Model 10 and a 22 pump and like an old Damascus steel double-barreled shotgun from the 1800s, I mean, that's not an arsenal. I mean, this guy, he had great-great-grandpa's shotgun and a bunch of garbage that he got, you know, who knows, off a trade from the barter section on Craigslist.
I have so much ammo, I've actually spread it out into various locations so that if something were to happen at my house...
I've done that for years.
Yeah. Because sorry, don't trust the government.
It is a way. Stop the war on everything, guys. You know what? We'll be right back for segment 4 on your viewer emails right after this.
Welcome back. We are now in segment 4, where we respond to your emails and we talk about the things that you would like to talk about, well, provided it's things we'd like to talk about. And so please do email us whatever you would like to talk about. There it is, the fancy little address. And that's exactly where these subjects are coming from. Listeners and viewers went ahead and emailed us at that address. And the first one we're going to talk about today, we'll see if we can burn up the whole segment with this one because it's pretty interesting, is, what are we talking about?
Well,
that's how unprepared we are. I forgot.
It's BillAndDaveShow@gmail.com for those of you who are listening to podcasts and whatnot. Bill and Dave Show or Dave and Bill Show, pardon me, Dave and Bill Show@gmail.com. And it was a question that came in from one of the viewers. Once someone has been convicted of a felony and they have served their debt to society, they've done their term, their probation, and they're done, should they have all of their rights restored automatically at that point?
Okay.
That's the question.
By the way, thank you, Jeremy. Let me lead off because I think mine is more linear, and then you can jump in and get to your more scattered approach.
Scattered approach.
Well, no. Just you're going to go off in different tangents with
Different
particulars.
tangents. Dave Champion, I'm surprised at you.
I didn't mean that in a negative sense. I love you, brother. Okay.
All right, let's see Dave's monofilament
There
approach
you go.
to this.
Very linear, yes. All right, here's my view about felons and their restoration of the right to keep and bear arms. Now, let me begin by saying I believe that the right to keep and bear arms, like the right of free speech and the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure, and we could go on and on and on, is an unalienable right. In other words, when you come, popping out of your mother, you have that right, and it is an inherent part of your existence on this planet. Now, with that said, there are things that you can do which would, in my view, interrupt you being able to freely exercise that right. And one of them would be committing a felony, being captured, being put on trial, and convicted. Okay? Now, at the point where you are convicted, society has said, you done the felony, yes? Okay. So, as a felon, during the time you are in the custody of the state, though many of those rights, for virtually all those rights, go away, okay? Including the right to keep and bear arms. Now, when somebody comes out on parole from prison, you and I both know from our legal background.
Cursory incarceration.
Right, you're still legally incarcerated, but you're allowed to walk around free. So the right would still hence be suspended. Once you are completely done and the state has no hold over you at that time, it's over. My personal view is that your 100% of your inalienable rights return to their operative status. Now, one last thought, and then I'll let you go. People will sometimes say that they don't like my view because these felons are dangerous. By the way, I should say the only felons I think that we should even be talking about are violent felons. Okay? Non-violent offenders, especially in the days of the war on drugs. Non-violent offenders, we shouldn't even be talking about the right to keep and bear arms. So when they come out and their rights are restored, my philosophy is that people say, oh my God, you're going to give that felon a gun? The problem isn't the former ex-felon with a gun. The problem is all of the Americans who have neglected their right to keep and bear arms. They've neglected carrying and training their own arms, so they feel like vulnerable sheep rather than stepping up, being men, and accepting their responsibilities as citizens of this country, because then, if the erstwhile felon were to choose to commit a violent felony, and he's in a store and he comes up with a gun, and there's 12 guys with blasters, how's that going to end up? That's how we should be correcting our problems, not through statutory law, not through depriving people of their inalienable rights. I'm done.
Let's talk for a moment about violent felons. There have been many studies that have happened all around the world, especially in the Western world, that have looked at violence as a neuroscience and other things that are related with you physically, up in the brain, chemical imbalances, things such as that. And there are some issues where people that are born with a reduced capacity prefrontal cortex, or they have extra hormones or imbalances in the amygdala, which are measured some as early as birth, and some as late as your late teens, that can oftentimes predict how people are going to be when it comes to having a propensity towards violence. And it's very interesting. They say that over 85% of violent felons who are incarcerated have one of these two areas. Nearly 90%, it was over 85%, nearly 90%. Other people just may have wigged out, whatever it may have been. So, in order to curb this and have so many violent felons locked up, I agree with you. If everyone else packed a gun, and when they decided to launch their violent attack on you or me or someone else, they'd be stopped right then and there. That would curb a lot of violence from happening. If violent felons came out and they decided they were going to commit some sort of a violent act on someone, and they continually were getting gunned down across the country, that sort of crap would stop. People that would use overbearing violence by they call it violence of action. right? If the criminals stopped using violence of action in order to perpetrate their criminal acts, and people were shooting them to stop them because of this violence, and it was a threat, an imminent threat to death or serious bodily injury to you or someone around you, you have the legal justification to stop them with bullets. Okay, that would end a lot of this. So I agree. However, and I'll also tell you that the idea of nonviolent felons having their rights taken away, and keep in mind, let's take something along the lines of a forger. I actually met a woman once when I was a police officer who had been convicted of forgery. Actually told me she was convicted of forgery. Now, she had failed to register as an ex-felon at a new address. I didn't care. It was forgery. Okay, go downtown and register in the next week or so. Just so you know, any cop could take the idea that they could take you in if they come into contact with you. If you don't do it, I ain't worried about it. You're a violent forger. I mean, what'd you do? Sign somebody's name and send it through a fax machine? Hey, come on.
Yeah.
Convicted of forgery. But all of her rights taken away. She can't vote. Right. She can't carry a gun. None of that stuff. But
a guy who embezzles $1,000, he's a felon. Really? Give me a break.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, he would be if he's convicted of that. And it's interesting.
I mean, a felon, but don't take his gun rights.
A lot of oftentimes violent and even nonviolent crimes are pled down. They still might be felonies, but let's say someone commits rape. They might have it pled down to indecent behavior with a minor, something like that, which is still a felony, but it's not rape. It's pled down. They do a deal. They still have their felony conviction. But the thing that's interesting, actually, I should say that I used a bad term when it came to sex crime, because oftentimes people that are convicted, they've committed some sort of a crime. If it can be construed as a sex crime, it's oftentimes plugged up a lot further, because they know that a lot of people's hearts are behind, oh, you can't be a sex criminal. We're going to really throw the book at you.
Right.
You really don't want to go to trial on that. When it comes down to it, my answer is this. If it's a non-violent act after 5 years after serving all of your term, 5 years later, you can automatically, your rights are restored.
Not 4 years and 3 months?
No, 5 years. That's my thought. If it's something that is questionable when it comes to violence, was it really, I mean, armed robbery, you could have been convicted of armed robbery when you weren't literally sticking a gun in somebody's face. There's a lot of application to it. For something like that, I think that maybe it should be like a hearing sort of a deal and apply back for it and have literally a group of your peers, not a judge, a group of your peers, maybe a grand jury, something like that, look at it and have them decide.
Right, because today you can petition to have a judge decide.
You can, in certain areas. I believe in California, if you were convicted of a felony, and I'm not sure, I'll try and look this up. You might know. You were in California for many years. If you were convicted of a felony, it used to be that a judge could grant you your rights back after a certain amount of time, but I heard recently that no, the only way you could do that is to actually get a pardon from the governor at this point. They've removed that from the judges. I don't know. Did you ever hear anything about that?
If that change has taken place, it took place after I left, and I have not heard of it.
Okay. It might be incorrect.
After I escaped from behind the communist curtain.
Behind the Iron Curtain.
Yeah.
And I also understand that if you're convicted of a felony in one state, but it's not a felony in a state that you move to, you don't have to register as an ex-felon in most cases. But if you wanted to get have a judge reinstate your rights, you have to go back to the state in which you were convicted in order to have that done. Like, you couldn't get convicted of a felony in California and then move to Vermont and ask a judge in Vermont to restore your rights. I don't believe that you can do that.
But I like your idea of taking the judge out of the loop, because really, by the way, the vast number of people who do petition courts to get their Second Amendment rights reinstated they are successful. Probably because there are statutory requirements going in, so people know if I haven't fulfilled those, why am I bothering to ask? However, I do like the idea, since it's an unalienable right we're talking about taking a government official out of the loop.
Well, keep in mind, it's an unalienable right. However, in the Constitution it says, until upon your first conviction of a felony. So that's in the Constitution.
Well, hang on a second, though. But an unalienable right, all we're talking about is suspending it based on a set of circumstances.
Correct, absolutely.
So this, lifetime ban on voting or lifetime ban on firearms, or, and it's not just firearms, it's carrying any weapon. Yeah, I know a guy, for instance, who he's got to be early 50s now. Just before he was scheduled to go in the Air Force, he did something horrendous, and he went and he tried to rob a liquor store. Yep, got caught. 19. He's now in his early 50s. Through his, did his whatever they sentenced him to, came out, has lived a pristine life since then, has owned several businesses, wife, kids. His kids are like valedictorians in sports, you know, they're winning all sorts of awards in sports. They're adults now. And through all of this, he's never been able to defend himself for his family because of what he did when he was 19.
The chief executive of Fatburger, excellent businessman, was convicted of a federal offense, and now he's lost those rights. But he's still a CEO now of a major corporation of Fatburger and doing great things. So there should always be a provision to it.
He makes Fatburgers. That is doing great things. I love that place.
Yeah, not a bad spot to eat at all. Actually got served a burger by a woman who is a native of the country of India who worships cows. And it was, I'm like,
the irony, huh?
it would be like going into a kosher place and getting kosher bacon. It just doesn't work.
Right.
So anyhow, I like the idea of after you served everything, have another couple of years to really get solidified. And then they automatically go back. If there was any violence involved, have it to a jury of your peers, a grand jury, something like that.
I like that idea. That's probably one of the best things I've heard in a long time about the restoration.
I just came up with it.
My friends, thank you for joining Bill and I. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care.